listening to 12 Hats Radio, the marketing podcast with a difference.
Good morning. It's Monday the 8th of March 2021 and you're listening to 12 Hats Radio, the marketing podcast with difference. Now today I've got a feeling my famous applausometer will be worn out very quickly because first and foremost it's my 100th original episode outside of trailers and reruns during the summer. So first and foremost, let's press the yellow button. Secondly, I've timed this well for International Women's Day, and this one's for all the sisters out there, all the female entrepreneurs. I know you listen to the show, and this is for you and the sisterhood breaking through the glass ceiling and being a good role model for the rest of humanity. So, ladies. Now, for today's guest, it's Annie P. Ruggles from Chicago, Illinois, USA. And Annie is very passionate about teaching therapists and life coaches how to nail sales without being so sleazy. She's also the host of the Too Jit to Quit podcast, which I appeared on as well earlier this month. And Annie is coming up after the break. We've got a very special guest. We've got Annie P. Ruggles from Chicago, Illinois, USA. And of course, I've been on her show, Too Jit to Quit, and now it's her turn to turn the favour and be on my show. And Annie, thank you very much for coming onto the show. And first and foremost, can you just give us a quick rundown on what you're all about?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me, Dave. As he said, I am Annie P. Ruggles. I'm in Chicago in the U.S., and I am the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy. So I work with healers, helpers, coaches, do-gooders to help them sell in a way that is in keeping with the ethics, morals, integrity, and enthusiasm that brought them into business instead of trying to force them how to do it how their sleazy competitors are doing it, or keeping them in the space of just marketing all the time.
Great stuff. And let's rewind the tape back. When did this begin? How did you get started into what you're doing?
Well, I never, ever expected to be in sales. I have a musical theater degree, which is just totally bizarre. I grew up with a motivational speaker mother and a business strategist father. And so the last thing I wanted to do was any kind of consulting or speaking. I was like, no, I will never. I'm an actress. I'm going to be on stage and people will love me. So I went to school. That's what brought me to Chicago for musical theater. And I loved it. But as a, 19-year-old, I had to pay my rent somehow. So I started working a reception desk for a big theater conglomerate's desk, right? I worked the reception desk and they liked me and they were very, very cheap. So when a marketing position came up, they were like, oh, Annie will do it. I knew nothing about marketing, Dave, nothing, zero, absolutely none. I had no training. So it was very much a baptism by fire in the marketing world. But I really loved it. And so I like to say I'm blessed with OCD. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. And so when I decide that I'm going to learn something, I'm going to learn it. And so I was like, all right, if they're not going to teach me marketing, I'm going to teach me marketing. And it turns out I had this natural talent. So then I'm like, okay, it's 2000 and I don't know, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And this word starts getting thrown around, life coaching. And I'm like, yes, that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be a life coach. And so I, started studying all of that and put a shingle out as a life coach, and people started hiring me. But what they hired me for back then turned out not to be life coaching. They wanted to understand why my marketing was so good. And so then they were like, okay, I don't want you to coach me. I want you to market me. And so I did that for many, 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 many years. But I finally wound up in sales. Long story finally ending because I watched these brilliant people, dedicated, driven people spend so much money and time and energy and faith in themselves and identity, all of it. And then they would get to the finish line and they would fall down. And the finish line is sales, right? They wouldn't ever get to the point of asking for the sale. So again, I got obsessed. I was like, listen, I gotta find a way not to drag these people across the finish line, because that's not the kind of client provider relationship I wanted. But I gotta figure out what's tripping them up at the finish and make sure that I remove that barrier for them and with them so that then they can cross it on their own. So that is the very backward story of how I wound up teaching sales to coaches.
Great stuff. And of course, what are some of the great resources out there that helped you on your journey?
One of the things is I am super lucky that I grew up in an entrepreneurial household and with a mother who was and a father who were both active networkers. So I've always been surrounded by two things. One is the entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like you don't have to ever go into corporate. You can make your own way. You don't have to have this very predictable path, but also the people that I was introduced to and exposed to as a kid was just phenomenal. Like other kids were going to summer camp and being in rowboats and stuff, which sounded really cool, but I was meeting world leaders and phenomenal Olympic athletes and all this stuff because they were speakers. And so when I traveled with my mom, there they were. So that was definitely a big leg up. But all along then, my best resources have always been the connections with people I meet. So that same energy of, I'm a little kid, I don't understand how cool it is that I'm meeting you yet. I still bring that exuberance to every relationship I meet, and those relationships have paid back more than I could ever anticipate returning. So sitting there, getting there in the conversations with people has just been ultimately not only helpful and supportive, but it's been just so gratifying as a way to live.
Yeah, wow, I guess it's in your blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, some things can be taught, some things are just nurtured, I guess it really is. Comes down to that.
But I tried so hard not to be part of the family business, Dave. I tried so hard.
Yeah, it's life's tough being a black sheep. I can vouch for that. And Annie, so what are some of the myths about sales that you wish to dispel right now?
I want people to understand that selling does not automatically make you a bad person. In that, if you decide to command a price for your products, for your services, that does not cheapen it in any way, and it does not cheapen you in any way. In fact, by prioritizing yourself as part of a win-win equation, it really serves them far more than if you have to make them feel like they're doing you a favor by buying because they had to coax the sale out of you, right? So it's actually much more of an act of service to sell than to withhold the sale.
Wow. Yeah, well, we had this similar chat on the other episode, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, we really did. But like, I was just talking about this earlier today. Like, if you desperately loved chocolate cake, You just absolutely loved it. And you decided it was your mission in life that you were going to make your grandmother's chocolate cake recipe and you were going to feed it to the masses. You're like, I'm done. No more radio, no more podcasts. I'm a cake man now. I'm doing cake things. Like, okay, cool. Then you would go to the store, you would buy all the ingredients, you would unearth the recipe, you would critique it, perfect it, advertise it, market it, take pictures of it, blah, 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 blah. Send an email out to your list saying, hey, come try my grandma's chocolate cake. But if you don't actually say, and here is how you receive the cake, and also I would like to be compensated for the cake, then you're doing the exact same thing as saying, everyone come experience my grandma's cake. But then when they get there, it's behind glass. They can see it, they can smell it, they can't eat it, they can't experience it, they can look at it, they can assume it tastes good. But that's what we do when we overmarket and undersell, is we put our value behind glass of our own making when we've tried so hard to tear down boundaries between us and our prospects. And then we put the wall back up. So that's the number one myth I wanted to dispel, is that not selling is the disservice, not selling.
Absolutely. And you got to get that value proposition out, you know? That's
Yes.
the secret sauce, so to speak. I'm not talking in cooking terms, but
Yes.
you can't value yourself, you can't value your product. How can you sell? I mean, it's just asking strangers for money, and that's wrong, really.
If you even get to the point of asking, most people quit before they even ask. They're like, well, I won't bother them. Okay, you won't bother them. Well, did you think you were going to bother them when you went into business? Like, how did you think this was going to happen?
Exactly. Now, on your podcast, you'd also talk about tying in marketing with popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Again, how did it start? But also, there's any myths out there that you like to dispel about popular culture that we should really know about, especially about tying into marketing? That's a bit of a loaded question, but
There are marketing and sales lessons in everything. If you apply the right filter, you will never run out of inspiration, strategy, tactics, quotes, idea for content. It's everywhere. And the way that you can find it is when something moves you positively or negatively, if you're drawn to it or repelled by it, ask yourself why. What did the pop culture piece do that led you to have that thought, that led you to have that emotion? If it's an emotion you want your clients to eventually have, then reverse engineer it and say, okay, how can I elicit this emotion in my business? Or if you see a negative salesperson depicted in pop culture, which is almost all salespeople depicted in pop culture, look at what they're doing. Really, truly, humor or not, look at what they're doing and set action items to do the opposite. If you just did those two things, if you just started tracking what attracts you and what repulses you, and look at the action and the strategy behind it, and if you look at the sales representation that you see on the screen, positive and negative, and make action items in a good sense on one hand and say, oh, but I'll do the exact opposite on the other, you will have enough sales education in one Netflix binge to keep you going for at least a week. I love it. I love it. I mean, anything too, like a book, right? Like one of the biggest things that I've talked about for the longest time is that, yes, sales is manipulative if you define manipulation as causing a person to do or feel something. So if you read a really amazing book and you're flipping those pages like crazy, that book is manipulating you, man. That book wants you to keep reading, and that book needs you in order to do that, to want to know who the murderer is, or if the couple will get back together, or what the big mystery is, right? They want you to do that. Selling is the exact same thing. We want people to feel emotions in a certain order to make a certain discovery, right? So by that means anything that motivates you, anything that inspires you, positively or negatively, could be marketing information.
There you go. This is great advice. This is free great advice right here.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Netflix and chill means Netflix and pay attention.
Netflix and market, baby. Netflix and market.
Now, speaking of books, is there anything that you've read or inspired lately that has inspired you?
You know, it wasn't something that I read because I read a lot of dark dystopian fiction to deal with dark dystopian America. But on the flip of that, I did see a show that I just freaking adore, and I find it so inspiring, and it's on Netflix actually, and it's called We Are the Champions, and I really hope that y'all have it in Australia because one of my very favorite people on the show is from Australia, and I looked her name up. But what We Are the Champions is, it's a documentary series, but each episode covers a different competitive something, right? So I would say competitive sports, but not all of them are sports. And so the episodes that I've seen recently, there's one about Rubik's Cubes, like how quickly they can do the Rubik's Cube. There was one about cheese chasing, where in England, they take giant wheels of cheese and like put them down a very steep hill. And if you get it to the end, like, and people like die, they like break their necks doing this, but it's like the whole town, like it's their rallying thing of like, who's going to catch this cheese? And then the most recent one that I watched had this wonderful Australian woman whose name is, she's from Sydney, and her name is Brianna Skinner, the Australian chili queen. And she was competing in this hot pepper eating competition where the peppers are all like so far off the Scoville meter, like I have permanent acid reflux just thinking about these peppers. But what I love about this show so much is that in each of these different pursuits, how fast can you do a Rubik's Cube? How hot of a pepper can you eat without drinking milk? Or, you know, how quickly can you throw yourself, literally hurl yourself down a hill after a wheel of cheese? The level of commitment and dedication and tenacity involved in this, especially because nobody just competes in this one time. Either you try once and win immediately and have to keep your title, right? Which has its own challenges and its own struggles, or you lose and you lose and you lose and you lose. And every time you try to beat your previous score, and every time you hope that it's the time that you'll take it all. And I just think it is so gorgeous. It is such a testament to dedication, but also to loving what you love.
Yeah.
Because chili peppers are not for everybody, and I love cheese more than anything in the universe, but there is no way in hell I would hurl myself down a hill after it. But that's their thing. So what's your thing? Be that dedicated at it. I just think the show is fantastic. It's on Netflix. It's called We Are the Champions.
Well, I'm sure it'll probably be out here already, but we'll have a look. And certainly, folks, there you have it. Listen out for it whenever you get Netflix.
Yeah, and if you're ever in the same room as the chili queen, please tell her that she has a big fan in Chicago, because she does.
We'll pass on the message to Brianna. I don't think we'll take her out for dinner, but food might disagree with me after a while. But
Oh, I was like, oh, it's. I will say, expect on the cheese one. If you watch the cheese chasing and if you watch the chili peppers, like take an aspirin first, because you're gonna get some sympathy pains, like you just are.
Yeah, I've been to that village in Gloucestershire where they had a cheese rolling.
Yeah!
I lived over there back in my 20s, and that hill is quite steep. It's like that.
Yeah. No way.
It's crazy.
You could tell me I would get a lifetime supply of cheese, and I still, you could tell me that I could come in last place and win a lifetime supply of cheese, and then I would consider doing it. But if you told me that I came in last place and got nothing, then no, count me out.
You're breaking ankles.
Nope. Nope. Not even cheese is worth breaking my neck.
No. And finally, have you got a lighthearted story for my listeners?
Yes, I do.
Right.
I don't know. It's always so wonderful to talk to people from other parts of the world because I don't know what cultural things jump and what don't. But in Australia, is there a quintessential example of a really nasty salesman? Like if you were like, ew, I hate salesmen. I don't want to be like a blank. In the US, we have a very strong repulsion to used car salesmen.
I think it's the same in this country. In fact, I've got a very dodgy uncle. I'm not going to name names. I don't think he's listening to the show anymore. Apparently, allegedly, I'm not going to, because I don't want to get him in awkward, but apparently he got blacklisted many years ago amongst used car salesmen because he's such a sleaze.
He got banned among used car salesmen for being a sleaze. That's amazing. That is pro level sleaze. Well, let me tell you a lighthearted story about the exact opposite. So I told you about my mom and I told you about my dad, but my mom's dad was a used car salesman. And he was born in Germany. He was raised in Germany during the rise of Hitler. And then they thought, we got to get out of here. So my great-grandmother took her tiny boys, put them on a boat, came over. My grandpa did not speak English. He found a job working in a Chevrolet plant in St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the absolute middle of absolute nowhere. Sorry, St. Louis, but you are. And started working his way up from there. Then the war came and he enlisted immediately on our side, blah, 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 did a lot of incredible war hero stuff, which I could go into on 97 other podcasts, but this is a marketing podcast, not a war podcast. So when my grandpa came back from the war, he needed to get a job and started thinking seriously about his future. And that same Chevy plant said, Fred, we think you would be a really incredible salesman. Now, my grandpa was not a charming man intentionally. He had a lot of natural charm in that he was just so quiet that you're like, oh, Fred, he's just a quiet, pleasant kind of a guy. So he did not have that ooey, gooey, nasty personality at all, nor was he emotional. I think if my grandpa understood that I teach emotion-based selling, he would be completely confused by that. That was just not his way. But what he did do was he listened and prescribed. He listened to what they needed, and he sold them the right car for them. He didn't sell them more. He didn't sell them less. He just sold them exactly what they asked for. And if they asked him for help, he would meet them where he could. And if they didn't, he didn't offer it because that doesn't work either. And here's the lighthearted, beautiful part of the story. My grandpa worked at Big Four Chevy for most of his life, but retired and was retired for over 2 decades before he passed away. And when he passed away, his name was Fred Keller, super common name. Okay, like total basic American melting pot name. Nothing special about the name. Apologies to anyone named Fred Keller. It's just not that special of a name. But when my grandpa passed away in his 90s, people he sold cars to in the 1960s who had not seen him in over 20 years, saw his name in the paper, came to his funeral, and said he is the most upstanding salesman I ever knew, always took care of us, never double-crossed us, never did anything but listen. And so we are here at his funeral talking to his family to say he was a wonderful and upstanding man. So my thing that I want to put out to your listeners is, if he, who was not emotional, not empathic, and not in any way skilled in sales or marketing according to book smarts, if he can make an impact that big in an industry that stigmatized, so can you.
Absolutely. I think this might be unprecedented, but 2 applauses in the show. That's just a record here, folks. I'm really.
Oh my God! I'd say I didn't prepare a speech, but I've been talking for like an hour, so. Ooh. But it's an honor to have the double applause. Thank you, Dave.
No worries, Annie. Anyhow, finally, is there anything I didn't ask but should?
I love having conversations with people. So what you didn't ask me is, what is the best way to start a conversation with me?
What's the best way?
I love it. So you can find me on Instagram at Anniepreneur. You can find me at on Clubhouse at APR. You can go through my website through the boring form if you want to. But if you find me on social media, reach out, say you listened. Ask a question about cheese rolling, whatever you want. But I said at the very beginning of the episode that people have been my greatest resource. I would love to be a great resource for you. I would love to connect you to others. If you're listening to this and you feel inspired, please start a conversation with me. I'd love to get to know you.
Great stuff. And there you have it. I'll make sure that Annie's details are in the show notes. And please give us, out there, folks, give Annie our love and support. And
yes, I would love your love and support. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was so great to have you on Too Legitimate to Quit. I'm so excited to be with you on 12 Hats, and I can't wait for whatever's next for you and I, Dave.
Absolutely. This has been a Podcast West production. 12 Hats Radio has been produced and edited by me, Dave Monk. If you love this show, please give us a 5-star review on Podchaser, or Apple Podcasts, and that way you can get the word out how great this show is. Just like Janet56 from the UK, who left one back in January, who gave me a 5-star review and told me that the show is very interesting and she tunes into it every week. Now, join us on Friday as we've got Jeroen Couteau. He is the founder of Salesflare over in Brussels in Belgium, and he'll have a chat about his journey and SaaS as a product, which I think a lot of you entrepreneurs, especially with a CRM system, will pay great attention to. Until next time, is the Cat with the 12 Hats signing out.